I hadn't been to my friend's house in months. Life had gotten in the way, work, studies, the usual excuses, but when I finally found myself walking up the familiar driveway, it felt like stepping back into a place half forgotten, half remembered. The porch light was already on, glowing softly against the fading daylight. I knocked, expecting the heavy footsteps of my friend, his usual grin as he opened the door. But instead, the door swung wide, and there she was, his mother. She leaned casually against the doorframe, a teasing smile, curving her lips as if she'd been expecting me all along. Her laugh came first, bright and warm, like a spark that caught me off guard. "Well, look at you," she said, her voice low and lilting, carrying the kind of confidence only someone fully at ease with herself could have. "I almost didn't recognize you." For a second, I forgot what to say. The years hadn't changed her in the way I expected. If anything, they had refined her, the kind of beauty that doesn't shout for attention but quietly holds it, like the stillness of water before dawn. I stumbled through a greeting, but she just laughed again, shaking her head. The sound was soft yet alive, filling the quiet hallway behind her. "Don't just stand there," she teased, stepping aside to let me in. As she did, the faint scent of her perfume drifted past me, something floral, subtle, but strong enough to linger in the air. I stepped inside, suddenly too aware of how close we passed. Her hand brushed against my arm in a casual, almost unthinking gesture as she guided me toward the warmth of the living room. The touch was light, fleeting, but it landed with a weight I couldn't explain. The house was the same, yet not the same. A little quieter, a little softer, as though her presence alone shaped the atmosphere. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows, catching in her hair and turning it into strands of gold for just a moment. She noticed me staring and raised an eyebrow, the corner of her mouth tilting into that same playful smile. "What?" she asked, pretending to sound stern. "Am I that different from before?" I swallowed, unsure of how honest to be. "Different, but in a good way," I admitted finally, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. She laughed again, the sound bubbling up easily. And for the first time, I realized how much space her energy filled, how naturally she commanded it, not with force, but with warmth. That first meeting wasn't meant to be anything special, just a simple hello before catching up with an old friend. But standing there, watching the light play across her face, listening to her laughter curl through the air, I had the sudden, disorienting sense that something had shifted, as though this house, this visit, was going to be different from anything I had imagined. The kitchen smelled faintly of chamomile and lemon when she motioned for me to sit at the table. She moved with a kind of ease that made even the simple act of setting down 2 mugs feel deliberate, graceful. I found myself watching her hands as she stirred a spoonful of honey into her tea, slender fingers, the faintest shimmer of her wedding band catching the light, though I knew her husband had been gone for years. She slid a mug toward me, the porcelain warm against my palms, and sat across the table. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that invited attention, where every little detail felt amplified. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the gentle curl of steam rising between us, the way her eyes studied me, as though searching for the younger version of myself, she remembered. "You've changed," she said finally, tilting her head, a sly smile tugging at her lips. I laughed awkwardly. "Hopefully for the better." "Oh, definitely for the better," she teased, resting her chin lightly against her hand. "You've grown into yourself." Though, her eyes narrowed playfully. "You look older than 22 should." I smirked, trying to keep the mood light. Says the one who just admitted she almost didn't recognize me. "Careful, you're making yourself sound old." The words slipped out before I could catch them, but the moment they left my mouth, I froze. For a beat, she only stared at me. Then, suddenly, her laughter broke through, a warm, ringing laugh that filled the kitchen. She leaned back, shaking her head, eyes sparkling with mischief. "You call me old?" she repeated, amusement thick in her voice. "I'll show you young again." Her words, half joke, half challenge, landed heavier than I expected. I felt the heat rise to my face, and for a moment, I couldn't meet her gaze. She was still laughing, her fingers curling around the edge of her mug, the steam from her tea fogging the rim of her glasses before she gently pushed them up onto her head. "Relax," she said softly. The teasing's still there, but gentler now. "I know you didn't mean it." But part of me wondered if she wanted me to mean it. If maybe, underneath her humor, there was something she wanted me to notice, something more than just grace or beauty. As she leaned across the table to slide the sugar bowl toward me, her fingers brushed mine. It was the lightest contact, barely there, yet sent a quiet jolt racing up my arm. She didn't pull back immediately. Instead, she let her hand linger for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, her eyes watching me closely. I tried to cover my sudden silence by taking a sip of tea. The warmth spread through me, but it had nothing on the way her laughter still echoed in my chest. That evening, sitting across from her in the dim kitchen light, I realized something startling. I wasn't just talking to my friend's mother. I was talking to a woman who seemed to see right through me, who met me not as a boy she remembered, but as a man sitting in front of her. And that realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. After finishing our tea, she stood and stretched lightly, her hand brushing the side of the counter as though weighing whether to end the evening there. Then she glanced toward the back door, the hint of a smile curving her lips. "It's a shame to waste this weather indoors," she said, her voice soft but inviting. "Come with me. I want to show you something." I followed her through the sliding glass door into the garden, and for a moment the world shifted. The evening had settled in, a pale blue sky giving way to dusk, and the air was cooler, tinged with the faint sweetness of roses. The garden was more beautiful than I remembered. Her touch was everywhere. The careful arrangement of stones along the path, the trimmed hedges, the small fountain that whispered as water trickled over its edges. She walked slowly, her steps deliberate, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. I fell into step beside her, realizing how naturally we matched pace. "This place keeps me sane," she murmured, pausing near a bed of roses. "It's quiet, alive, but never demanding. People can be demanding. But these," she reached out, brushing her fingertips against a pale blossom. "They only ask for care." There was something in the way she said it, a small crack in her voice that tugged at me. I wanted to answer, but for once words didn't come easily. So I just listened. As we moved along the stone path, she slipped slightly on the uneven surface. Instinctively, her hand reached out, catching my arm just above the elbow. The pressure was feather-light, but I felt it everywhere. The warmth of her palm through the thin fabric of my sleeve, the unspoken trust in that simple gesture. "Careful," I said, though my own voice came out lower than I expected. She looked up at me, her eyes meeting mine, and for a brief moment it felt like neither of us moved. Then she smiled, soft and self-aware, and let her hand fall away slowly, as though reluctant to give up the contact. We reached the fountain, its gentle bubbling filling the quiet between us. She sat on the low stone edge, motioning for me to join her. The cool air carried the faint perfume of wet earth and flowers, mixing with the subtle fragrance of her hair as she tilted her head back to watch the last streaks of color fade from the sky. "Do you ever feel," she asked suddenly, her tone thoughtful, "that people see only parts of you? The parts they expect, not the whole?" Her question hung in the air. I didn't answer right away, because I knew what she meant, and I could feel the weight of her words wasn't just casual musing. She was letting me in. "I think everyone wants to be seen," I said finally, my voice quiet. "Completely. Not just in pieces." When she turned her face back toward me, the expression in her eyes was softer, more open, vulnerable even, and I realized she wasn't talking about roses or expectations anymore. Something subtle had shifted. The garden wasn't just beautiful because of the flowers or the evening light. It was beautiful because she was sharing it, and herself, with me, and that felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to hold, but couldn't let go of either. Later that night, just as I was about to leave, the power flickered and then went out. The house sank into sudden darkness, broken only by the dim orange glow of the street lamp through the curtains. I heard her soft laugh in the silence, amused rather than unsettled. "Well," she said, "so much for timing. Stay a little longer. I'll find some candles." A few minutes later, the living room was transformed. Small candles dotted the shelves and coffee table, their flames swaying gently with each draft from the windows. The familiar space felt different now, more private, almost sacred. Shadows moved across the walls, blurring edges and softening everything, including her. She sat across from me on the couch, tucking one leg beneath her, cradling a glass of water in her hands. The candlelight touched her face, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the softness of her lips. There was no effort in how she held herself, no performance, only quiet presence. "This takes me back," she said, her voice low, thoughtful. "When I was younger, we'd lose power all the time. My mother used to make it an adventure. We'd sit by candlelight, telling stories until the lights came back on." I smiled. "Sounds better than staring at a phone screen all night." Her laugh was gentle, but it faded quickly into silence. She lowered her gaze to the flame between us, her expression distant. "Sometimes I miss that," she admitted. "The feeling of being seen, heard, like what you said earlier in the garden. These days, it's easy to feel invisible. People assume you're strong, that you don't need anyone. But it gets lonely." The honesty in her words caught me off guard. I wasn't used to hearing her voice crack with vulnerability. She had always seemed so composed, so steady. Seeing that quiet fragility made my chest ache. Before I thought twice, I reached across the table and laid my hand gently over hers. Her skin was cool at first, then slowly warmed beneath my touch. She glanced up, surprised, her eyes catching mine in the flickering light. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. She just let her hand rest under mine, her fingers trembling slightly before settling into stillness. "You're not invisible," I said softly. "Not to me." Something shifted in her expression then, as if my words had peeled back a layer she kept hidden from the world. She gave the smallest nod, her lips parting like she wanted to say more, but the words never came. Instead, she just let out a breath, and the candle flame bent with it, swaying between us. We sat like that for what felt like forever, her hand beneath mine, the glow of candlelight painting shadows across her face, the silence heavy but strangely comforting. And in that silence, I realized I didn't just want to see her. I wanted her to know, deeply, undeniably, that I did. The night deepened around us, the candles burning lower, their wax pooling softly at the base. Tom had slipped away without either of us noticing. We had moved from the couch to the armchairs, and then back again, as if the room itself shifted to keep us near each other. I knew I should leave. It was late, and my friend could return at any moment. But when I stood and reached for my jacket, something in her expression made me pause. She was smiling, but it wasn't the playful smile from earlier. It was quieter, almost wistful. "You should get going," she said, her voice softer now. Yet she didn't rise, didn't walk me to the door. She just stayed there, candlelight washing her features in gold. I nodded, slipping one arm into my jacket. But as I turned, she reached out, her hand catching lightly at my wrist. The touch froze me in place. Her fingers were small against my skin, warm in a way that seemed to burn right through the fabric of my sleeve. I glanced back at her, and for the first time that night, she didn't try to hide the way she looked at me. Her eyes searched mine, steady but hesitant, as if she was asking a question without speaking it aloud. The air between us thickened, heavy with something unspoken, and I realized I wasn't breathing evenly. "Wait," she whispered. Just that, one word. I lowered myself back onto the couch, and she let go of my wrist only to fold her hands in her lap, as though grounding herself. A silence stretched between us, so fragile it felt like the wrong word could shatter it completely. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted at last, her voice trembling just slightly. "But tonight, I don't feel my age. I don't feel the weight of everything people expect me to be. With you, it feels different." Her confession hung in the air, and my chest tightened at the vulnerability it carried. I wanted to say something, to reassure her, but no words seemed strong enough. Instead, I leaned a little closer, Not enough to break the boundary, but enough for her to know she wasn't alone in what she was feeling. Her breath brushed against my cheek, faint and uneven. She turned her face toward me, and for a heartbeat it felt like the world held still. The distance between us was no more than inches, too close for casual, too far for what we both wanted, but couldn't admit aloud. Then she drew in a steadying breath and sat back, a quiet laugh slipping from her lips, breaking the tension just enough to keep us both grounded. "I shouldn't," she murmured, almost to herself. But her hand stayed close to mine on the couch, her pinky brushing against my knuckle. The smallest, most delicate contact, yet enough to set every nerve in me alight. We didn't say anything more after that. We didn't need to. The silence itself spoke louder than words. A silence so full, so charged, it was clear. Something had shifted between us, and nothing would quite be the same again. The room felt different after that moment. The closeness, the breathless silence, the way her hand had lingered near mine. The tension was still there, humming just beneath the surface, but she was the one who shifted it first. She leaned back against the couch, exhaling softly, and a small laugh slipped from her lips. It wasn't the playful, teasing laugh from earlier in the evening. It was quieter, almost shaky, the kind of laugh people use when they've walked too close to a line and need to step back before they lose themselves. "I'm sorry," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I don't know what's come over me tonight. You must think I'm ridiculous." I shook my head immediately. Not ridiculous, just human. Her eyes flickered up to mine, searching for sincerity, and whatever she found there seemed to soften her shoulders. She reached out then, not as bold as before, but with the gentleness of someone who needed reassurance. Her hand found mine where it rested on the couch, her fingers curling just slightly around my own. The touch was tender, unhurried. She didn't grip too tightly, didn't hold me captive. She just let her hand rest there, her thumb brushing once across the back of my knuckles as if to say thank you. Not with words, but with touch. "Sometimes," she murmured, "it feels like people only see what they want to see in me. A mother, a caretaker, someone dependable. But not me, not the woman I still am." Her voice wavered at the end, and before I could think, I squeezed her hand gently. "I see you," I said. "I really do." Her breath caught at that, and for a moment her eyes shone with something unspoken, a mixture of gratitude, longing, and relief. Then she laughed again, softer this time, shaking her head as if to break the heaviness of her own confession. "You're kind," she whispered, though the way she said it made me wonder if she believed it was more than kindness. She let our hands stay together for another few breaths before slowly slipping hers away. The absence left a dull ache, but her smile as she pulled back carried warmth, not distance. "You should go," she said finally, her tone lighter, steadier now. "It's late, and I don't want you getting the wrong idea." I nodded, though a part of me already knew the idea was there. Not wrong, just unspoken. As I stood to leave, she rose with me, walking me toward the door. The candles flickered behind us, their flames shrinking low, as though mirroring the way the night itself was gently winding down. At the door, she rested her hand briefly on my shoulder. The pressure was light, almost absent-minded, yet it carried the same warmth as everything else that evening. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet, "for listening, for being here." I met her eyes one last time before stepping outside into the cool night air. And though the air was crisp against my skin, I carried the lingering heat of her touch with me, a warmth that wouldn't fade, no matter how far I walked. The morning came quietly, sunlight slipping through the curtains in soft gold stripes. I woke earlier than usual, a little restless, the memories of the night before replaying in my mind like a half-forbidden dream. Every detail lingered, the flicker of candlelight on her face, the warmth of her hand in mine, the way her voice had softened when she let herself be vulnerable. By the time I gathered my things and made my way to the front hall, the house was awake again. I could hear the sound of movement upstairs, her son, my friend, finally stirring. Soon enough, he would come down, filling the house with the easy noise of everyday life. But for now, it was still just the two of us. She was already waiting by the door. Not rushed, not flustered, simply composed, as though she'd been expecting me. She wore a light sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and when she smiled at me, it wasn't the playful, teasing smile from the day before. It was gentler, knowing. "You're heading out?" she asked softly. I nodded, adjusting the strap of my bag. "Yeah, I should." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped closer, her hand lifting almost hesitantly, before brushing a stray lock of hair back from my forehead. Her fingers lingered there, just for a second longer than necessary, and the touch was so tender it made my chest tighten. "Take care of yourself," she murmured. The words were simple, but the way she said them, the weight in her tone, the softness in her eyes, told me they carried more than just polite farewell. I swallowed, searching for something meaningful to give back. "And you," I said, "don't let anyone make you feel invisible. You're unforgettable." Her eyes held mine at that, and a faint flush of color touched her cheeks. She didn't laugh this time, didn't deflect the words with humor. Instead, she squeezed my arm gently, her thumb brushing once over my sleeve before she pulled back. From upstairs came the sound of footsteps, the muffled slam of a door. The spell of the night, of our closeness, began to settle back into the ordinary rhythm of life. Yet even as it did, I knew something had shifted permanently. She opened the door for me, the morning air rushing and cool and bright. I stepped outside, the sunlight warm against my face, but before I turned away, I glanced back. She was still there, framed in the doorway, her hand resting lightly against the wood, her smile soft but steady. Not a goodbye, not entirely. More like an unspoken promise that what had passed between us, though quiet and hidden, was real. I walked down the path slowly, each step pulling me farther from the house, but not from the memory of her touch, her laugh, her gaze. Those lingered, pressed into me like sunlight that refuses to fade. And though nothing outwardly had changed, I carried with me a new understanding. That sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that leave us altered forever, seen in ways we never imagined, and remembered in ways we can never undo.